The harsh truth: most dating advice you're following is completely backwards. You're chasing relationships before mastering yourself, and it's sabotaging your love life at every turn. In this video, I'm going to share relationship strategies that actually work. Strategies I discovered after 7 years of dating failures that left me questioning everything. Like most people, I was focused on impressing others rather than developing myself. Remember the client who came to me after his 5th failed relationship in 2 years? His transformation will surprise you. If you're tired of repeating the same dating mistakes and ready for real transformation, this is the wake-up call you need. The Self-Mastery Foundation. Let's talk about what most dating advisors won't tell you. While everyone's busy searching for the perfect match, they miss the essential first step: becoming the right person before finding the right person. This truth feels uncomfortable because it places responsibility squarely on your shoulders. The relationship you want begins with you, not someone else. Think about it. Would you want to date the version of yourself you are today? Many people expect qualities in partners they haven't developed themselves. They want someone financially responsible while drowning in unnecessary debt. They demand emotional stability from partners while experiencing mood swings that impact everyone around them. Self-discipline forms the foundation everything else builds upon. Without personal discipline, even the most promising relationships eventually collapse. I've watched countless clients find partners with every quality on their wish list, only to sabotage these relationships because they lacked internal structure and self-control. Your relationship patterns reflect your personal development level with startling accuracy. This explains why so many people repeat identical relationship mistakes with different partners. When someone tells me, "I keep attracting toxic people," what they're really saying is, "I haven't addressed the parts of myself that create or allow these dynamics." The common denominator in all your failed relationships is you. Self-mastery stands on 3 core pillars most people overlook. First, emotional regulation, the ability to process feelings without being controlled by them. Many relationship conflicts stem from emotional reactions that spiral out of control. Second, having purpose beyond the relationship gives you stability when romantic challenges arise. People who make their partner their entire world create unbearable pressure on the relationship. Third, personal standards govern what you'll accept from yourself before considering what you'll accept from others. Undisciplined people create chaos in relationships regardless of who they date. A person who can't manage their spending habits brings financial stress into every relationship. Someone who can't regulate their emotions turns minor disagreements into major conflicts with any partner. A person without personal standards accepts disrespect repeatedly, teaching each new partner how to treat them poorly. Your personal habits connect directly to your relationship quality. The person who breaks commitments to themselves breaks commitments to partners. The individual who avoids difficult conversations with family or coworkers avoids necessary relationship discussions too. Your daily patterns reveal your true character, which emerges vividly in relationships despite initial attempts to hide these tendencies. This creates an uncomfortable truth. Your daily routines predict relationship success better than your dating profile. The way you handle stress on an average Tuesday tells me more about your relationship potential than your carefully curated photos or clever bio. The relationships you want become possible only after reaching certain levels of self-control and personal development. I worked with Michael, a client who cycled through relationships for years without understanding why they failed. He appeared perfect on paper, successful career, physically fit, socially confident, yet his relationships consistently ended after 3 to 4 months. When we examined his daily habits, the pattern became clear. He consistently prioritized work over personal commitments, regularly canceled plans last minute, and avoided emotional discomfort through distraction. These behaviors emerged in every romantic connection. Once Michael built self-discipline in maintaining commitments, communicating honestly about his availability, and sitting with uncomfortable emotions rather than escaping them, his relationship success transformed completely. He approached dating with the mindset of a disciplined athlete, rather than a spontaneous weekend warrior. Instead of making promises he couldn't keep, he became reliable in small ways, arriving on time, following through on tasks, and honoring his word. He's now in a 2-year relationship with more depth than anything he experienced before. Rebecca complained about attracting partners who didn't respect her boundaries. Through our work together, she realized she hadn't developed the self-discipline to maintain any personal boundaries at all. She regularly agreed to things she resented, worked extra hours without compensation, and let friends borrow money without repayment. Her relationship patterns directly mirrored her lack of personal boundaries in all areas. By practicing boundary enforcement in small daily interactions, she developed the strength to maintain them in romantic relationships too. The truth is that self-mastery transforms relationship outcomes more dramatically than finding someone with the right characteristic. James struggled with jealousy and control issues in every relationship. Rather than blaming his partners, he focused on developing trust in himself. He built confidence through setting and achieving personal goals. He practiced sitting with uncomfortable feelings without acting on them. Within 6 months, his jealousy issues diminished because he developed self-trust. You don't need to reach perfection before dating. That's unrealistic. But you do need honest awareness of your development areas and active work to improve. The level of relationship you can sustain matches your level of personal development. You simply cannot maintain a relationship that requires more emotional maturity, self-discipline, or communication skill than you currently possess. Conduct an honest self-assessment in 3 key areas before seeking your next relationship. First, evaluate your emotional regulation. How do you handle disappointment, frustration, or hurt feelings? Do small triggers create large reactions? Second, examine your purpose beyond relationship. What goals, interests, and values would remain important even in a committed partnership? Finally, assess your personal standards. What behaviors do you consistently demonstrate that you'd expect from a partner? Every aspect of self-mastery can be developed through consistent practice. The person who struggles with emotional regulation can learn to identify triggers and create response plans. Those without purpose beyond relationships can explore interests and set meaningful goals. People with inconsistent personal standards can start with small daily commitments to themselves. Start today by focusing on one aspect of self-mastery that would most improve your relationship readiness. As you develop greater self-discipline, you'll naturally become more attractive to the kind of partner you truly desire. This personal development creates the foundation for the authentic attraction and deep connection we'll explore in the next section. Understanding attraction psychology. Now that you've learned about self-mastery, let's examine what actually creates attraction. There's a significant gap between what people claim attracts them and what research shows really happens in their brains. When surveyed, most people list qualities like kindness, intelligence, and sense of humor as their top attractions. But brain scan studies tell a different story. When monitoring neural activity during attraction, researchers found that unconscious factors drive attraction far more than conscious preferences. This disconnect explains why many people end up with partners who don't match their stated preferences. Your brain responds to subtle cues about genetic compatibility, unconscious familiarity patterns, and nonverbal signals that operate below conscious awareness. Your stated preferences matter, but less than you might believe. The advice to just be yourself when dating works only if your natural behaviors align with attraction principles. Being yourself serves those who are naturally confident, present, and emotionally regulate. However, if your natural state includes anxiety, neediness, or poor boundaries, authentic expression might sabotage potential connections. Consider attraction like swimming. Some naturally float while others need specific techniques to stay afloat. Both can become excellent swimmers, but their approaches differ based on natural tendencies. Understanding attraction principles helps present your authentic self in ways that create connection rather than prevent it. Attraction fundamentally differs between initial meetings and long-term commitment. Initial attraction responds to novelty, physical appearance, and confidence signals. Lasting attraction grows from reliability, emotional safety, shared values, and compatible life vision. This explains why relationships with intense chemistry often fizzle within months, while some strong long-term relationships build gradually without immediate fireworks. Research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology demonstrates that your unconscious attachment style determines attraction patterns more powerfully than conscious preferences. These attachment styles, formed in childhood, create templates for how you expect relationships to function. For your dating life, this means the partners who feel magnetically attractive might reflect your attachment patterns rather than compatibility. Secure attachment allows comfort with both intimacy and independence. Anxious, avoidant, or disorganized attachment patterns often lead to attraction toward people who reinforce these familiar but potentially unhealthy dynamics. This mechanism explains why someone with anxious attachment repeatedly pursues avoidant partners despite heartbreak. The dynamic feels unconsciously familiar, even if consciously painful. People consistently choose partners who trigger unresolved emotional issues. This pattern represents the psyche's attempt to heal old wounds through new relationships. My client Rachel couldn't understand her attraction to emotionally unavailable men despite wanting commitment. She discovered this pattern stemmed from her relationship with her emotionally distant father. Only after addressing this original wound could she begin feeling attraction toward available partners. Attraction involves both biological and emotional components that sometimes conflict. Biologically, we respond to signs of health and genetic compatibility instantly and unconsciously. Emotionally, we respond to kindness, attentiveness, and feeling valued. Understanding these potentially conflicting systems helps make conscious choices rather than following attraction blindly. Physical attraction matters, but emotional attraction determines relationship sustainability. Warning signs of unhealthy attraction include feeling anxious rather than peaceful around someone, obsessing over their approval, ignoring red flags because of chemistry, feeling pressure to change yourself, or experiencing dramatic emotional highs and lows. These signals indicate attraction based on insecurity rather than genuine connection. Many mistake intensity for intimacy, believing overwhelming feelings signal true love. Genuine attraction typically brings a sense of calm alongside excitement. You feel authentic rather than perform. Conversations flow naturally without constant anxiety. You appreciate differences without feeling threatened by them. According to attachment theory research, genuine long-term attraction grows from security, not uncertainty or drama. While chemistry might spark from the excitement of the unknown, lasting attraction builds through consistent positive experiences. The brain forms attachment through reliability and safety, not through anxiety or ambiguity. This research contradicts tactics like playing hard to get, which might increase initial interest but ultimately undermines relationship potential. These approaches trigger anxiety responses that feel like attraction, but actually prevent the security needed for genuine connection. The emotional rush from uncertainty differs completely from the deeper attraction that grows with consistent validation. Many people sabotage relationships with partners who are actually good for them because healthy connections feel unfamiliar. If your relationship history includes drama or emotional extremes, a secure relationship might initially feel boring. Jason, a former client, nearly ended his relationship with a loving partner because he didn't feel the spark from previous toxic relationships. He discovered this spark was actually anxiety, not authentic attraction. Your action step: identify your attraction patterns by examining your last 3 relationships. Look beyond surface characteristics to emotional dynamics. Did these relationships make you feel secure or anxious? Did you feel accepted or constantly proving your worth? Did conflicts resolve constructively or escalate dramatically? Then identify when these patterns first appeared in your life. Do they mirror family dynamics or early relationships? This awareness doesn't automatically change your attraction response, but gives you power to pause before acting on potentially unhealthy attraction. When feeling strong attraction, ask yourself, is this familiar or is this healthy? Sometimes it's both, but often it's one or the other. Choose partners who create both strong feelings and emotional well-being. By understanding these psychological principles, you transform attraction from a mysterious force into a process you can navigate consciously. Setting relationship boundaries. Now that we understand attraction psychology, we need to talk about boundaries. Here's a painful truth most people don't want to hear. Without clear boundaries, you'll never be truly respected in relationships. Not sometimes, not eventually, never. This might sound harsh, but I've seen it play out hundreds of times with clients. People who fail to establish clear boundaries find themselves consistently treated in ways that make them unhappy, resentful, and eventually bitter. Boundaries are the definitive lines that protect your well-being, values, and self-respect. They communicate to others how you expect to be treated. Without them, you silently tell people they can treat you however they want without consequence. Others may not intentionally disrespect you, but they'll naturally push limits until they encounter resistance. Think of boundaries as a protective moat around your personal castle. This moat doesn't prevent people from reaching you. It simply requires them to cross in appropriate ways, using the drawbridge you've designed. Those who try to swim across or demand you drain the moat entirely aren't respecting your kingdom's security. Most people set boundaries far too late, only after negative patterns are firmly established. They start relationships being completely accommodating, saying yes to everything, ignoring small discomforts, and prioritizing their partner's needs above their own. They believe this flexibility makes them more lovable. Then months later, when resentment builds to an unbearable level, they suddenly try to establish limits. By this point, changing established relationship patterns feels like a major disruption, rather than a natural part of the relationship. Consider training a puppy. If you let it jump on furniture for 6 months, then suddenly decide that behavior is unacceptable, the training becomes much more difficult than if you establish that rule from the beginning. Relationships work similar. Patterns set in the early stages become the foundation for everything that follows. Every relationship needs 3 non-negotiable boundaries from day one. First, respect for your time and commitment. This means your partner respects when you say you're busy, doesn't expect you to drop everything for them, and values your existing commitments. Second, emotional safety. You need the freedom to express feelings without fear of explosive reactions, silent treatment, or other emotional punishment. Third, physical and sexual boundaries. These encompass everything from personal space preferences to sexual comfort levels. These 3 areas represent the foundation of self-respect in relationships. Without them, the relationship will eventually undermine your sense of self. I've watched clients tolerate violations in these areas for years, always hoping things would improve naturally. They rarely do. Instead, violations tend to escalate over time. Many people fear that setting limits will push their partner away. The truth is that proper boundaries actually increase attraction. When you clearly communicate your needs, you demonstrate self-respect and emotional maturity. These qualities prove far more attractive long-term than endless accommodation and people-pleasing. Take Alex, who never set boundaries about late-night texting with his girlfriend. He would respond immediately at 2 a.m., even with early work meetings the next day. He thought this showed dedication, but his girlfriend found it concerning. When he finally established a boundary about not texting after 11 p.m. on work nights, their relationship improved. His girlfriend respected him more for prioritizing his needs, and he felt more in control of his life. Many confuse controlling behavior with healthy boundaries. Controlling behavior restricts what others can do based on your insecurities or desire for power. Boundaries define what you will accept and how you'll respond to others' behaviors. The key difference: boundaries focus on your actions and responses, not on controlling your partner's choice. For example, saying you can't have friends of the opposite sex represents controlling behavior. A boundary would be, I'm not comfortable in a relationship where one-on-one dinners with opposite-sex friends happen regularly. The first attempts to control your partner's behavior. The second clearly states what you will and won't accept, leaving your partner to make their own choices while understanding your limits. Your partner's response tells you everything about your relationship's future. When you state a reasonable boundary, healthy partners might discuss it, seek clarification, or even negotiate aspects, but they'll ultimately respect it. Partners who respond with anger, accusations, persistent violations, or guilt trips are showing you exactly how they'll treat your needs throughout the relationship. Common boundary mistakes include inconsistency, enforcing them sometimes but not others, poor communication, expressing them as hints rather than clear statements, and making empty threats, stating consequences but never following through. Communicating effectively requires balance. Use I statements that focus on your feelings rather than accusing or demanding. Instead of saying, "You need to stop calling me so much," try, "I need quiet time in the evenings. I'm happy to talk during the day, but after 8 p.m. I need that time for myself." Discuss boundaries during calm moments, not during conflicts when emotions run high. There's a direct relationship between your self-worth and your ability to maintain boundaries. People who believe they deserve respect find it natural to establish limits. Those with lower self-worth often fear rejection if they ask for too much. Without boundaries, they experience increasing disrespect, which further damages their self-worth, making boundary setting even harder. For your practical exercise, write down your relationship boundaries before your next date, not after problems arise. Create 3 lists: absolute deal breakers, strong preferences, and areas of flexibility. This forces you to think proactively about your needs. Setting clear boundaries leads to increased confidence, deeper mutual respect, and significantly higher relationship satisfaction. People who master this skill report feeling more authentic in their relationships and experience less anxiety about partner interaction. They know exactly where they stand and what they will and won't tolerate, creating the foundation for truly equal partnerships built on genuine respect. The X factor: managing past relationships. Now let's talk about one of the most contentious issues in relationships: staying connected with ex-partners. The uncomfortable truth many people don't want to hear is that maintaining friendships with exes rarely works for the reasons you think it does. Most people claim they stay friends with exes because they value the person's role in their life, don't want to lose the connection, or believe mature adults should be able to transition from romance to friendship. While these explanations sound reasonable, they often mask deeper psychological motivations. I've worked with hundreds of clients who insisted their ex-friendships were completely innocent, only to later recognize these connections were preventing them from fully investing in new relationships. When you maintain active connections with people you once shared romantic and sexual intimacy with, you create emotional complexity that impacts new relationships. This complexity exists whether you acknowledge it or not. Every ex-friendship requires honest examination rather than automatic continuation. These lingering connections often prevent genuine bonds with current partners. Emotional energy functions as a limited resource. Every text conversation with an ex, social media check-in, and reminiscing moment consumes energy that could deepen your current relationship. These connections create comparison points that new relationships struggle to compete with, especially since memories selectively preserve positive aspects of past relationships while forgetting the problems that caused their end. The psychology behind why we maintain expired relationships reveals our attachment patterns. Some people maintain ex-connections as emotional insurance policies for when current relationships fail. Others use these friendships to avoid complete separation and necessary grief. Many maintain connections to protect their ego, proving they remain desirable. And frequently people fear the finality of complete separation. Rebecca maintained friendships with 3 ex-boyfriends for years, believing these were meaningful platonic connections. During our work together, she realized she kept these men in her life because their continued attention validated her self-worth. Each message or meeting reassured her that she mattered to them. After building internal validation, these connections naturally fell away, as she recognized they served her insecurity rather than adding value. To determine if your ex-friendship is innocent or serving another purpose, ask yourself, do you share details about your current relationship with this ex? Do you compare your current partner to your ex? Do you hide aspects of your ex-friendship from your current partner? Does contact with this ex significantly impact your mood? Would you feel threatened if your ex developed a serious relationship? Affirmative answers suggest the friendship serves purposes beyond platonic connection. Digital connections create subtle psychological impacts many underestimate. Every social media update from an ex refreshes neural pathways connected to that relationship. These digital ties keep past relationships psychologically present in ways impossible for previous generations, who made cleaner breaks by necessity. Michael believed following his ex on social media meant nothing. When we tracked his mood patterns, he discovered he felt worse about his current relationship on days when his ex posted about her accomplishments or activities. This unconscious comparison created dissatisfaction he only recognized when we made the connection explicit. Removing these digital ties significantly improved his relationship satisfaction. Contrary to popular belief, maintaining friendships with exes rarely demonstrates emotional maturity. Truly secure individuals can appreciate what relationships provided, learn valuable lessons, and move forward without ongoing connection. Real strength shows in your ability to close chapters completely when necessary, creating space for current relationships to thrive. Some situations require ongoing connections with ex-partners, particularly co-parenting relationships. When children are involved,
Maintaining a functional, respectful relationship serves their well-being. Even then, the connection should focus primarily on parenting matters, rather than personal sharing. Clear boundaries protect all parties involved, including children who benefit from appropriate parental separation. Long-term exes from your distant past may transform into genuine friendships, especially when both people have moved on completely and lost any romantic tension. These relationships differ fundamentally from recent or emotionally charged ex-connections. Your practical action steps: conduct an honest inventory of your ex-relationships. List everyone with whom you maintain contact, including social media connections. 2. For each person, identify the actual value this connection brings to your current life, not theoretical value or past meaning. 3. Recognize emotional needs these connections fulfill that might better be met through current relationships. 4. Have clear conversations about creating appropriate distance without drama or blame. Take practical steps like removing social media connections, deleting old messages, and establishing clear boundaries. 6. Practice complete transparency with new partners about any remaining ex-connection. Remember, creating distance from past relationships honors what they meant while creating space for current relationships to flourish. The most respectful way to treat significant past relationships is often allowing them to remain in the past, preserving their memory without complicating your present. I invite you to share in the comments how these principles have played out in your own relation. Which ex-connections have you maintained, and what purpose do they truly serve? Your experiences might help others recognize patterns in their own lives. The journey toward relationship clarity often begins with one honest conversation, sometimes with yourself.
The dependency trap. Now that we've covered boundaries, we need to discuss one of the most dangerous relationship patterns I see constantly: emotional dependency. This silent relationship killer operates under the radar, making it particularly destructive because most people don't recognize it until significant damage has already occurred. It starts innocently enough, but gradually erodes the very foundation that healthy relationships require. Emotional dependency differs from normal attachment. In healthy relationships, two people choose to be together because they enhance each other's lives. In dependent relationships, people feel they need the other person to function properly. This distinction creates entirely different relationship dynamics. Dependent relationships often feel intense and all-consuming initially, which people mistake for deep love. In reality, this intensity signals an unhealthy attachment pattern that eventually suffocates the connection. The warning signs of dependency appear gradually rather than all at once. Significant anxiety when apart from your partner, feeling incomplete or unable to enjoy activities without them. Identity loss, abandoning personal opinions, hobby, and values to match your partner's preferences. Decision paralysis, inability to make simple choices without your partner's input. Digital dependency, constant texting, location sharing, and expecting immediate responses. Feeling incomplete without the relationship. Viewing yourself as half-seeking completion. Social media has created new forms of dependency that previous generations never faced. The constant digital connection means many couples never truly experience separation. This continuous connection prevents the natural individuation that healthy relationships require. Healthy relationships require two complete individuals choosing to share their lives, not two incomplete people seeking completion. When you enter a relationship, feeling like half a person seeking your other half, you set yourself up for dependency from the start. Many relationships feel satisfying in the moment, but actually stunt personal growth. When two people become enmeshed, they stop challenging each other to grow. They create a comfortable bubble that feels safe, but prevents either person from developing fully as an individual. This happens because dependency creates fear of change. Any evolution threatens the delicate balance of the relationship. Sarah and Michael illustrate this pattern perfectly. Their relationship appeared ideal from the outside. They spent all their time together, agreed on everything, and rarely argued.
But this harmony came at a cost. Sarah had abandoned her dream of starting a business because Michael subtly discouraged any activity that took her attention away from him. Michael had lost touch with all his friends because Sarah became anxious whenever he socialized without her. Their relationship prevented both from growing into their full potential. Understanding the difference between wanting someone and needing someone changes everything about how you approach relationship. Wanting comes from abundance. You have a full life and choose to share it with someone who adds value. Needing comes from perceived lack. You feel incomplete without the other person. This distinction determines whether your relationship enhances your life or becomes the center of your existence. When dependency takes hold, it creates power imbalances that eventually destroy attraction and respect. The person who needs the relationship less inherently holds more power. The dependent partner continuously makes concessions, gradually losing self-respect. The less dependent partner often loses attraction as they watch their partner's identity diminish. This dynamic explains why many dependent relationships end with one person suddenly leaving after the other has compromised everything. The counterintuitive approach that saves relationships from dependency is creating space and independence. Couples who maintain separate interests, friendships, and occasional time apart typically report higher relationship satisfaction than those who do everything together. This separation creates healthy tension and prevents stagnation. Mark and Jennifer transformed their dependent relationship by intentionally creating space. They established personal growth days each week where they pursued separate interests. Jennifer rejoined her running club while Mark took guitar lessons. These separate activities gave them new experiences to share and rekindled their attraction. Your personal interests and friendships must remain intact even in committed relationships. These external connections aren't threats to your primary relationship. They're essential supports that keep it healthy. They provide perspective, prevent your relationship from bearing the weight of all your needs, and help maintain your unique identity. Many people abandon these connections gradually, not realizing the consequences until they've become completely dependent. Each small sacrifice seems reasonable in isolation, but together they create the conditions for dependence. Breaking dependency patterns requires courage because it means facing the fear that your relationship might not survive if you reclaim your independence. This fear keeps many people stuck in unhappy patterns. The reality is that relationships strong enough to last will survive this rebalance. Your action step is to identify 3 activities you've abandoned since entering your relationship that you need to reclaim. Choose activities that reflect your authentic interests rather than shared couple activity. Then have an honest conversation with your partner about reincorporating these elements into your life. Start with small steps rather than dramatic changes. Schedule a regular evening with friends. Dedicate time to a personal hobby. Make decisions without automatically consulting your partner. Each independent action builds confidence for further steps. The relationship you ultimately want requires 2 whole people choosing each other day after day, not because they can't survive apart, but because they genuinely prefer life together. This choice made from strength rather than weakness creates the foundation for lasting love that enhances rather than restricts your life.
Managing temptation and commitment. Let's talk about the reality of temptation in committed relationships. Most advice pretends it doesn't exist, or suggest that truly loving someone means never finding others attractive. This sets you up for failure because it contradicts basic human biology. Your brain doesn't suddenly stop noticing attractive people just because you've committed to someone. Pretending otherwise leaves you unprepared when temptation inevitably appears. Understanding this biological reality doesn't justify acting on attraction, but it does allow you to prepare for it effectively. Your brain responds to novelty, variety, and certain physical and psychological triggers regardless of your relationship status. These responses happen automatically, below the level of conscious choice. The difference between faithful partners and unfaithful ones isn't whether they experience attraction, it's how they manage it when it occurs. Most people rely solely on willpower to resist temptation, which proves remarkably ineffective. Willpower functions like a muscle that fatigues with repeated use. You might successfully resist temptation 9 times, but on the 10th, when your willpower is depleted from other life stresses, you become vulnerable. This explains why many infidelities occur during periods of unusual stress,
travel, or life transition. Your normal defenses weaken precisely when you need them most. The missing element most people overlook is environment management, proactively structuring your surroundings to minimize temptation rather than constantly fighting it. This approach acknowledges that prevention works better than resistance. Think about recovering alcoholics who avoid bars entirely rather than sitting in them trying not to drink. The same principle applies to relationship fidelity. Creating environments that support your commitment proves far more effective than constantly testing your willpower. Identifying your personal temptation triggers represents the first step in effective prevention. These triggers vary significantly between individuals based on past experiences, relationship patterns, and personal vulnerability. Common triggers include alcohol consumption, certain social environments, feeling unappreciated at home, specific types of emotional connections, or particular physical characteristics. The key is honest self-assessment about situations where your commitment feels most vulnerable. Jason, a client who traveled frequently for work, recognized that business trips created his highest risk situations. The combination of distance from his partner, social drinking with colleagues, and the anonymity of hotel environments weakened his normal boundary. He created specific prevention strategies by scheduling evening video calls with his partner, avoiding hotel bars, and making sure colleagues knew he was in a committed relationship. These environmental adjustments supported his commitment when willpower alone might have failed. The uncomfortable truth many relationship experts won't tell you is that commitment requires ongoing attention. The traditional view of commitment as a single moment, saying wedding vows or agreeing to exclusivity, creates a false sense of permanence. Lasting commitment requires hundreds of small choices that either strengthen or weaken your connection. Each time you turn toward your partner instead of away, prioritize their feelings, or resist an outside temptation, you actively recommit to the relation. Many people unknowingly create situations that increase their likelihood of infidelity while maintaining plausible deniability about their intentions. They nurture inappropriate friendships while insisting they're just. They place themselves in high-risk environments while claiming they can handle it. These situations create slippery slopes where small boundary crossings gradually lead to larger ones, each step seemingly innocent in isolation but problematic in combination. Understanding the critical difference between noticing attraction and acting on attraction changes how you approach commitment. Noticing attraction happens automatically and doesn't reflect your character or commitment level. Acting on attraction, whether through pursuit, flirtation, or creating opportunities for connection, represents a choice that does reflect your values. This distinction removes unnecessary guilt about natural responses, while maintaining clear responsibility for your actions. Lisa felt tremendous guilt whenever she noticed attractive men, interpreting these normal responses as evidence she didn't truly love her husband. This guilt created emotional distance in her marriage as she withdrew to hide her feelings. Once she understood that noticing attraction was simply her brain functioning normally, she stopped seeing it as threatening. This allowed her to acknowledge these moments briefly without giving them power, strengthening her commitment rather than weakening. Transparency with your partner creates natural accountability that supports commitment without creating paranoia or control dynamics. This doesn't mean sharing every fleeting attraction, which would likely create unnecessary insecurity. It means being open about situations that might present temptation, rather than hiding them. Telling your partner you'll be at a conference where an ex will be present creates accountability that helps maintain appropriate boundaries while demonstrating respect for the relation. Your self-esteem directly affects your susceptibility to outside attention and temptation. People with lower self-esteem often find external validation more compelling because it temporarily fills an internal void. They become vulnerable to anyone who makes them feel special, desired, or understood. Those with healthy self-esteem appreciate outside attention without needing it to feel worthy. Building self-esteem through internal validation, rather than external approval, creates natural resilience against temptation. The environments where your commitment faces its greatest tests reveal important information about your relationship vulnerability. Most people have specific situations where temptation feels stronger: when traveling alone, during conflict with their partner, in certain social settings, or during specific emotional states like loneliness or resentment. Identifying these high-risk environments allows you to create protection strategies before entering them rather than relying on in-the-moment decisions. Your action step is to identify the 3 specific environments or situations where your commitment feels most tested. For each situation, develop a concrete prevention strategy that modifies the environment rather than just strengthening your willpower. Write these strategies down and review them regularly, especially before entering situations you identified as high.
Communication that actually works. Now that we've covered managing temptation, let's talk about the foundation of everything in relationships: communication. Despite all the advice out there, most people still struggle with this fundamental skill. Why? Because most communication advice completely misses the point. It focuses on techniques and word choices, rather than the underlying intentions driving your communication. These surface-level approaches fail because they're like putting a fresh coat of paint on a crumbling foundation. Your communication style reveals your true relationship priorities more honestly than anything you claim to value. People who say their relationship matters above all else but communicate with contempt during disagreements show their true priority as being right, not maintaining connection. Those who claim to value honesty but withhold important information prioritize comfort over authenticity. Your communication patterns never lie about what you truly value. Most people can't identify whether they're communicating to connect or to control. This distinction determines whether your conversations build or destroy trust. Connection-focused communication aims to understand and be understood. Control-focused communication aims to manage outcomes, change behaviors, or protect yourself from vulnerability. The same exact words can serve either purpose depending on your underlying intention. Take a simple phrase like "we need to talk about our finances." When spoken with connection intent, this opens a collaborative conversation about shared goal. When spoken with control intent, it becomes an accusation or demand. Most people aren't consciously aware of which intention drives their communication, but their partners feel the difference immediately. Research from the Gottman Institute identified 3 specific communication patterns that predict relationship failure with almost 100% accuracy. The first is criticism, framing concerns as character flaws rather than specific behavior. Saying "you're so selfish" rather than "I felt hurt when my needs weren't considered." The second is contempt, communicating from a position of superiority through sarcasm, eye-rolling, or mockery. The third is defensiveness, responding to concerns by counterattacking or deflecting rather than listening. When these patterns become habitual, they signal a relationship in serious trouble. Michael and Sarah illustrated these patterns perfectly. During disagreements, Michael immediately criticized Sarah's character. "You're always so disorganized. You never think about how your mess affects me." Sarah responded with contempt, rolling her eyes and sarcastically saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Perfect. I forgot you never make mistakes." Michael then defended himself by bringing up Sarah's past errors rather than addressing the current issue. This cycle repeated for months until their communication completely broke down. The timing of difficult conversations matters far more than their content. Most people initiate important discussions at exactly the wrong moments, when they're already upset, when their partner is stressed or tired, or immediately after an incident when emotions run highest. They choose these moments because their need to address issues feels urgent. But this urgency guarantees poor outcome. You can have the most important point in the world, but if you bring it up when your partner is exhausted after a 12-hour workday, you're setting the conversation up for failure. Successful couples learn to recognize appropriate timing for important discussion. They create dedicated space for difficult conversations rather than forcing them into already stressful moments. They ask permission, "Is this a good time to discuss something important?" rather than ambushing their partner. This simple timing adjustment dramatically improves communication outcomes. Communicating needs without triggering defensiveness requires skill. The key lies in removing blame from your request. Most people unknowingly frame their needs as accusations. "You never help around the house," or "You always prioritize work over me." These statements immediately activate your partner's self-protection response, making it nearly impossible for them to hear your actual need. Try this instead. Start with observation.
Then share your feeling, explain your need, and make a specific request. I've noticed the dishes piling up this week. I feel overwhelmed when I come home to a messy kitchen. I need some help maintaining our shared space. Would you be willing to handle the dishes each evening? This approach separates the need from blame, making it much easier for your partner to respond constructively. There's a critical difference between expressing feelings and dumping emotion. Expressing feelings involves sharing your emotional experience in a way your partner can receive. I felt hurt when you were on your phone during our dinner. Emotional dumping unloads your feelings without consideration for impact. You made me feel terrible. You're always on your phone and never listen to me. The first opens conversation. The second shuts it down. Many people believe honest communication means saying everything without filter. However, honest communication without compassion becomes cruel. True honesty requires sharing your truth while remaining aware of impact. This doesn't mean suppressing important issues, but it does mean considering how your delivery affects the likelihood of being heard. Lisa prided herself on just being honest with Greg. She would point out his flaws directly, tell him exactly what she thought of his friends, and express disappointment without cushioning. When Greg became increasingly withdrawn, Lisa blamed his inability to handle the truth rather than recognizing how her delivery demolished any chance of productive conversation. When she learned to express her honest concerns with compassion, Greg became remarkably more receptive to difficult feedback. Your current communication patterns almost certainly reflect your childhood communication environment. If you grew up in a home where people yelled to be heard, you likely raise your voice during disagreements. If silence was used as punishment, you might withdraw when upset. If emotions were dismissed as weakness, you probably struggle to express feelings effectively. Understanding these connections helps you see your patterns as learned behaviors rather than fixed traits. Communication improvement requires concrete practice. Your practical exercise is to record your next difficult conversation with permission and analyze your true intentions afterward. Listen for criticism, contempt, defensiveness, emotional dumping, blame language, and timing choices. Notice what you said and why you said it. Were you trying to connect or control? Were you expressing feelings or unloading them? Were you choosing timing strategically or impulsively? True communication transformation begins with intention adjustment. When your genuine intention shifts from being right to understanding, from protecting yourself to connecting authentically, your communication naturally improves. The words might remain similar, but they carry entirely different energy that your partner intuitively feels. This shift creates the foundation for conversations that actually bring you closer together.
Building true intimacy. Let's talk about one of the most misunderstood aspects of relationships: true intimacy. Many people experience what I call the intimacy paradox. They engage in physical connection without emotional vulnerability and wonder why they still feel distant from their partner. You can share a bed with someone for years and still feel fundamentally unknown by them. Physical closeness without emotional openness creates an illusion of connection that eventually leaves both people feeling isolated within the relationship. This happens because true intimacy requires more than physical presence. It demands the courage to be seen fully, including the parts of yourself you typically hide. When you have sex without emotional vulnerability, you create temporary physical closeness while maintaining emotional distance. This pattern explains why some couples can maintain an active sex life while feeling increasingly disconnected from each other. Their bodies connect while their authentic selves remain hidden. Our culture has distorted what real intimacy looks like. Porn creates expectations that intimacy equals specific physical acts or appearances, rather than emotional connection. You see perfectly choreographed encounters that emphasize performance over presence. This creates pressure to focus on the external aspects of intimacy, rather than the internal connection that makes it meaningful. Social media promotes curated glimpses of relationships, showing romantic gestures and perfect moments, while hiding the vulnerable conversations and authentic exchanges that create true closeness. These influences lead many people to pursue a version of intimacy that looks good but feels empty. They master the outward appearances, the date nights, the vacation photos, the physical connection,
while avoiding the deeper elements that create lasting bond. This approach ultimately leaves them wondering why their relationship lacks the fulfillment they expected, despite checking all the visible boxes of what intimacy should include. Genuine intimacy requires accepting discomfort and risk that most people actively avoid. Real closeness means sharing your authentic thoughts, revealing your fears, and expressing needs that might be rejected. It requires showing parts of yourself that feel unsafe to reveal. This vulnerability creates the possibility of deep connection, but also the risk of hurt, judgment, or rejection. Many people unconsciously choose the safety of distance over the risk of true closeness. Jason and Melissa appeared to have the perfect relationship from the outside. They lived together for 3 years, shared friends and hobbies, and rarely argued, yet both privately felt a persistent loneliness they couldn't explain. During our sessions, they realized they had created unspoken rules about what was safe to share. Jason never talked about his career insecurities because he thought Melissa would lose respect for him. Melissa hid her family struggles because Jason seemed uncomfortable with emotional conversations. Their relationship contained plenty of togetherness, but little genuine intimacy. This explains why many relationships feel lonely despite constant togetherness. Couples spend their evenings in the same room, but absorbed in separate phones. They share a bed but not their authentic thoughts. They discuss schedules and responsibilities but not hopes and fears. This creates what I call the connection gap, physically present but emotionally distant. The relationship provides companionship without true understanding, eventually creating a profound loneliness that feels confusing because you're not actually alone. Most relationships never reach the deeper levels of intimacy because of fear. The first level involves sharing facts and information about yourself, your history, preferences, and basic experiences. Most relationships achieve this surface level easily. The second level involves sharing opinions and judgments, your thoughts about politics, religion, or value. The third level involves sharing your feelings, insecurities, and authentic internal experiences. This deepest level creates true intimacy but requires vulnerability that many people avoid out of fear. Creating space for vulnerability without losing respect requires understanding an important distinction. Vulnerability doesn't mean emotional dumping or using your partner as a therapist. It means sharing your authentic experiences in appropriate ways that create connection. The key lies in expressing vulnerability from a place of self-awareness rather than neediness. Sharing that you sometimes feel inadequate in your career comes across differently than constantly seeking reassurance about your value. Rebecca worried that showing vulnerability would make her partner see her as weak. She maintained a strong, independent image and avoided revealing struggles or insecurities. When she finally shared her fears about not being enough in the relationship, something unexpected happened. Rather than losing respect for her, her partner felt trusted and honored that she would share something so personal. Their connection deepened because her vulnerability created space for his own. Many couples confuse routine physical intimacy with genuine connection. They have regular sex that follows familiar patterns but lacks presence and authentic engagement. Their physical relationship becomes another routine rather than an opportunity for deep connection. True physical intimacy involves being fully present, emotionally engaged, and authentically responsive, rather than following scripts or focusing on performance. Your capacity for intimacy directly reflects your relationship with yourself. You cannot share parts of yourself that you refuse to acknowledge. If you reject your own insecurities, you'll hide them from your partner. If you judge your emotional needs as weakness, you'll prevent yourself from expressing them authentically. The parts of yourself you find unacceptable become barriers to true intimacy. Many people carry intimacy blocks from past relationship experiences. If vulnerability led to rejection in previous relationships, you likely developed protective patterns to prevent future pain. These might include keeping conversations superficial, changing the subject when emotions arise, using humor to deflect serious topics, or maintaining busy schedules that prevent deep conversation. Your action step is to identify one vulnerability you've been hiding and share it appropriately with your partner. Choose something meaningful enough to create connection, but manageable enough that sharing it feels challenging, yet possible. When you do share, focus on expressing your experience, rather than placing demands on your partner's response. This single act of authentic sharing often opens doors to deeper connection than months of surface-level interaction. Building true intimacy develops through creating patterns of safety where both people feel they can be fully themselves without fear of judgment or rejection. Each vulnerable exchange builds upon the previous one, creating a relationship where both people feel truly seen, accepted, and understood.
The character-based approach to dating. Now we need to talk about the most transformative shift in how you approach dating, focusing on character instead of chemistry. Most relationships fail, not because people didn't feel enough initial attraction, but because they selected partners based on factors that don't sustain relationships long-term. When you prioritize character assessment over immediate chemistry, you build relationships that actually last, instead of those that burn bright and quickly fade. Look at how most people choose partners. They focus on immediate attraction, shared interests, social compatibility, and surface-level connections. They ask themselves, do I feel drawn to this person? Do we like the same things? Do they fit into my social circle? These questions matter somewhat, but they miss the core elements that determine relationship success. It's like buying a car because you like its color without checking if the engine works properly. Most people select partners based on misaligned criteria. They prioritize how someone makes them feel in the moment over who that person actually is. They value confidence over consistency, charm over compassion, and social status over personal integrity. These choices lead to relationships with people who might be exciting initially, but lack the character necessary for lasting connection. Character red flags often appear early in relationships, but people ignore them when chemistry feels strong. These warning signs reliably predict future relationship problems. Pay attention when someone consistently speaks negatively about all their exes. This suggests an inability to take responsibility in relationship. Notice how they treat service workers. This reveals more about their character than how they treat you during the honeymoon phase. Watch for inconsistencies between their words and actions. These gaps widen over time. One client, Jessica, ignored multiple character red flags with her charming new boyfriend. He occasionally made cutting remarks about others, was consistently late, and had complicated explanations for why his past relationships ended. She dismissed these signs because of their strong chemistry. 6 months later, those same character issues became the center of their relationship problems. The cutting remarks eventually targeted her. The lateness reflected a broader pattern of unreliability, and the relationship complications emerged in their connection too. Research shows 3 character traits predict relationship success better than any other factors. First, emotional responsibility, the ability to own one's feelings and behaviors without blaming others. Second, integrity, consistency between words and actions even when no one is watching. Third, empathy, the capacity to understand and care about others' experiences. These traits matter more than education, attractiveness, income, or any other common selection criteria, because they determine how someone functions during relationship difficulty. Initial attraction often leads people toward partners who are wrong for them long-term because of how attraction forms. Your unconscious mind seeks familiar emotional patterns, even unhealthy ones. If you grew up with inconsistent love, you might feel strong attraction to emotionally unavailable people because the uncertainty feels familiar. If you had to earn affection through achievement, you might be drawn to partners who make you work for approval. These attraction patterns feel compelling but often lead toward relationships that repeat old wounds. This understanding opens the possibility of dating with purpose rather than emotion, a strategic approach most people avoid because it feels less romantic. Strategic dating means giving character evaluation equal importance in your selection process. It involves dating consciously rather than reactively, making choices based on long-term compatibility rather than short-term feel. Mark began dating strategically after several intense but ultimately painful relationships. He created a character assessment process that included observing potential partners in stressful situations, meeting their friends, and having direct conversations about values early in dating. This approach led him to his current relationship, a deep connection with someone whose character aligned with what he needed for lasting happiness. Understanding the difference between compatibility and chemistry helps clarify why some relationships succeed while others fail despite strong feelings. Chemistry creates the desire to be together.
the emotional and physical attraction that draws you to someone. Compatibility determines how well your lives, values, and approaches to relationship work together day to day. Chemistry makes you want to move in together. Compatibility determines whether living together brings joy or conflict. Many people mistake strong chemistry for compatibility or believe intense attraction can overcome fundamental incompatibilities. Chemistry can mask incompatibility temporarily, but it cannot eliminate it. When the chemical rush of new relationship fades, typically after 6 to 18 months, the underlying compatibility issues emerge clearly. At this point, many people feel blindsided by problems that were actually present from the beginning but obscured by strong feeling. Taking time to evaluate character saves tremendous pain. Most relationship heartbreak results from committing before adequately assessing character. You wouldn't buy a house without an inspection or accept a job without researching the company. Yet many people commit to relationships based on a few positive interactions and strong feeling. Developing character assessment skills requires learning to observe behavior patterns rather than relying on feelings or words. Notice how potential partners handle disappointment. Do they become childish or maintain emotional maturity? Observe how they talk about people not present. Pay attention to whether they keep small commitments, as this indicates whether they'll keep larger ones. These observations provide more reliable character information than what someone tells you about themselves. Your practical exercise is to create a character-based evaluation system before your next date. First, identify the specific character traits you need in a partner based on your values and relationship goals. Then develop questions and observations that reveal these traits naturally. Create a balanced assessment that includes what they say about themselves, what their actions demonstrate, and how they function across different contexts. Implementing a character-based approach means bringing consciousness to a process often driven purely by chemistry. You still allow for connection, spontaneity, and feeling. You simply ensure these experiences don't override important character evaluations. This balanced approach leads to relationships based on both authentic attraction and genuine compatibility.
Raising your standard. Let's talk about the hard truth no one tells you about standards. Your relationship standards directly reflect your actual self-worth, not the self-worth you claim to have. I've seen this pattern repeatedly with hundreds of clients. They insist they have high standards while accepting relationships that consistently disappoint them. This gap between stated standards and actual behavior reveals the painful reality of where your true beliefs about your worth actually lie. Most people claim to have high standards when discussing relationships. They create detailed lists of what they want in a partner: someone kind, successful, attractive, emotionally available, and committed. Yet these same people often accept relationships that provide few of these qualities. They date partners who treat them poorly, lack emotional depth, or demonstrate values completely opposed to their own. This disconnect reveals what you actually believe you deserve, not what you say you want. Amanda told everyone she required respect, honesty, and emotional availability in relationships. Yet she stayed 3 years with a partner who regularly lied about where he spent his evenings, made hurtful comments about her appearance, and shut down any conversation involving feelings. Her relationship reality reflected her true belief that demanding better treatment might leave her alone. How can you tell if your standards are actual requirements or just preferences you'll abandon when tested? Look at your relationship history. Requirements are lines you've never crossed regardless of how attracted you were to someone. Preferences are qualities you've repeatedly compromised on when chemistry felt strong or when staying seemed easier than leaving. Many claimed standards disappear completely when faced with the possibility of rejection or loneliness. The standards that matter aren't the ones you talk about. They're the ones your actions consistently demonstrate. If you say you require honesty but repeatedly date people who lie, honesty isn't actually your standard. If you claim to need emotional connection, but stay in shallow relationships, deep connection isn't truly your standard. Your real standards reveal themselves through what you consistently accept. Here's an uncomfortable truth most relationship coaches avoid. Raising your standards means being willing to be alone rather than compromising on what matters. This reality stops many people from establishing genuine standards.
They fear Saturday nights without plans more than they fear relationships that don't meet their needs. This choice keeps them cycling through disappointing connections rather than creating space for fulfilling relationships. Many people unknowingly lower their standards over time due to fear or convenience. They start relationships with clear expectations, but as attachments form, they gradually accept behaviors they initially would have considered deal-breaker. The human tendency to adapt to circumstances works against maintaining standards. Like the frog in slowly heating water, you adjust to declining relationship quality until you accept treatment you once would have immediately rejected. Thomas started dating his partner with clear standards about financial responsibility. He valued saving, careful spending, and transparency about money. Initially, his partner's occasional impulsive purchases seemed minor. Over 2 years, these behaviors escalated to hidden debt and secret credit cards. By then, Thomas had gradually adjusted his standards to accommodate each new boundary crossing, showing how standards erode without conscious maintenance. Your boundaries and standards function as interdependent systems. One cannot exist without the other. Standards represent what you require in relationships, while boundaries are the actions you take when those standards aren't met. Without boundaries to enforce them, standards remain theoretical ideas. This explains why many people with apparently high standards remain in substandard relationships. They lack the boundary enforcement necessary to make their standards operational. Many people struggle to distinguish between unrealistic expectations and legitimate standards. Unrealistic expectations demand perfection or require someone to fulfill needs they cannot reasonably meet. Legitimate standards focus on how you're treated, whether core values align, and if the relationship contributes positively to your life. The difference lies in whether your standards require someone to be superhuman or simply to be consistently respectful, honest, and aligned with your fundamental values. Your willingness to walk away ultimately determines the treatment you receive in relationships. This truth has proven itself repeatedly in my work with clients. People treat you according to what you accept. When you demonstrate through action that you'll stay regardless of how your standards are violated, you inadvertently communicate that your standards don't actually matter. Your partner may not consciously recognize this dynamic, but it shapes their behavior nonetheless. Lisa struggled with a partner who regularly dismissed her opinions and made decisions without consulting her. Despite expressing her unhappiness, nothing changed, until she packed her bags after a particularly dismissive incident. This action communicated her standards more clearly than years of conversations. Her partner's behavior changed because the consequences became real rather than theoretical. Most people underestimate how significantly their friend circle influences their relationship standards. When your friends accept poor treatment in their relationships, it normalizes similar treatment in yours. Conversely, friends who maintain high standards provide both examples and support for doing the same. This social influence explains why people often maintain different standards in different social environments. Your action step is to write down your non-negotiable standards and share them with an accountability partner. This writing process forces clarity about what you truly require rather than just prefer. Be specific rather than general. Instead of respect, define exactly what respectful treatment looks like in daily interactions. Rather than honesty, clarify what transparency you need about specific life areas. This specificity prevents the rationalization that often occurs when standards remain vague. Sharing these standards with someone who cares about your well-being creates accountability when emotions might override your better judgment. Choose someone who maintains high standards themselves and will question you when you begin making excuses for treatment that violates your stated requirements. Their perspective helps maintain clarity when attraction or attachment begins clouding your assessment of relationship quality.
Through everything we've covered, one truth stands out clearly. Your relationship with yourself creates the template for every other connection in your life. The quality of partner you attract, the treatment you accept, and the dynamics you create all reflect your relationship with yourself. Taking full responsibility for your relationship choices is uncomfortable but essential for different outcomes. Blaming others, circumstances, or bad luck keeps you stuck in patterns that never serve you. Master yourself first. Understand the psychology behind real attraction. Set proper boundaries from day one. Continue growing. The depth of relationship you can create directly reflects the depth of person you become.